Muito obrigado pela presença de vocês aqui num sábado à tarde, depois do almoço. Quem quiser dormir, fique à vontade. Mas a Hayley não vai deixar, porque ela tem coisas muito interessantes a contar para a gente. Meu nome é José Roberto de Toledo, eu trabalho num podcast chamado Foro de Teresina e, recentemente, saí da revista Piauí e estou agora escrevendo num portal que vocês talvez conheçam, que foi lançado há pouco tempo, chamado UOL. Nosso objetivo aqui hoje é aprender, pelo menos o meu objetivo aqui hoje é aprender com a Hayley Willis, ou Hayley Cook Willis, porque ela é meio coreana, meio americana. A Hayley faz parte de um time dentro do New York Times chamado de Visual Investigations. Eu não acho que exista no Brasil uma equipe similar a essa equipe do New York Times. Por isso que eu acho que é uma grande oportunidade para a gente aprender com ela como eles trabalham e ver o resultado do trabalho deles, não apenas porque é uma técnica relativamente nova e muito interessante, muito útil, como vocês poderão ver na apresentação da Hayley, ela vai tratar especificamente de uma investigação que eles fizeram sobre o famoso, de uma maneira negativa, 6 de janeiro de 2021 nos Estados Unidos, que foi a tentativa de invasão do Congresso americano. Tentativa não, a invasão do Congresso americano pelos partidários de Donald Trump, e que é uma situação que talvez a gente tenha que lidar aqui num futuro próximo, né? Então, a Hayley, ela nasceu em Michigan, uma região fria no norte dos Estados Unidos, mudou-se depois para o Texas, para perto de Austin, que é a capital do Texas, que, segundo um diplomata americano no governo Bush, uma vez falou: "Por que você vai fazer em Austin? Só tem comunista lá." De Austin, ela foi para Berkeley, onde ela fez a universidade. Ao sair de Berkeley, ela teve uma passagem... Lá em Berkeley, ela trabalhou no Human Rights Center e depois foi parar na Anistia Internacional. E da Anistia Internacional, ela entrou para o time de investigações visuais do New York Times em 2019. Logo veio a pandemia, o New York Times fechou a redação e a Hayley, então, foi trabalhar em casa, como todos os outros jornalistas do New York Times, e, mesmo assim, conseguiram fazer algumas investigações que resultaram nos principais prêmios jornalísticos dos Estados Unidos. Ela, apesar de extremamente jovem, como vocês podem ver, já ganhou o Pulitzer, Emmy e o George Polk Awards. Então, ela tem muito para nos contar. E ela vai começar contando a história do Day of Rage, que é a história da reportagem que eles demoraram 6 meses para fazer, contando, usando exclusivamente imagens de mídias sociais, exatamente o que aconteceu minuto a minuto dentro do Congresso dos Estados Unidos no dia da invasão, no dia da tentativa de golpe para evitar a declaração da derrota do Donald Trump. So, Hayley, please.
Hello. Thank you for what I assume was a lovely introduction. I only understood about 20% of it. I apologize in advance for my lack of Portuguese, but thank you all so much for having me here. It's been amazing. I've been to a few sessions using my Google Translate app to live listen, and I'm learning a lot. People who know me know that I've been pitching environmental stories at the New York Times for years, and nobody is more ahead of the game in that than Brazilian journalists. So thank you all for having me, and it's an honor to be up here with Toledo as well. I think that we should just start by letting you all see a little bit of our reporting. So I'll just show the intro to Day of Rage, just so you can get a sense of what it was about, and then I'll talk you through a little bit of how we did it.
So, Pedro.
This for all.
They came from all 50 states.
out of some sense of patriotic duty.
It's so much more than just rallying for President Trump. It's really rallying for our way of life, the American dream, against fake news.
To protest an election they believed had been stolen.
We're here, Patriots. We're in Washington, D.C., Capitol building dead in front of us.
Their day of action would be January 6th, when Congress would count electoral ballots and ratify the 2020 election results. For some, it was just a rally for their president. For others, it was a call to arms.
We have the power in numbers. March on Congress directly after Trump's speech.
In the weeks beforehand, there were over 1 million mentions on social media of storming the Capitol. Maps were shared of the building's layout. There was talk of bringing weapons and ammunition, and discussion over which lawmakers should be targeted first. This anger was based on a lie.
This election was a fraud.
A lie that had grown more frenzied after the election.
President Trump won this election.
They were flipping votes.
Steal the election in Philadelphia.
When you win in a landslide, and they
steal the election in Atlanta,
and it's rigged,
steal the election in Milwaukee.
It's not acceptable.
This is outrageous.
A lie spread by the president and his closest allies.
Let's call out cheating when we find it.
Some of whom stoked calls for violence.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Everyone's going to remember who actually stands in the breach and fights tomorrow and who goes running off like a chicken.
We bleed freedom.
This will be their Waterloo.
And we will sacrifice for freedom.
This will be their destruction.
What happened next was chaos.
They broke the glass?
Insurrection.
Take it now! Treason!
Death. Then there began a campaign to whitewash history, starting at the top.
It was a zero threat. Right from the start, it was zero threat.
And spreading throughout the Republican Party.
Even calling it insurrection, it wasn't. By and large, it was peaceful protest.
One lawmaker who helped barricade the House doors now suggests there was barely any threat.
If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
A tourist visit? This was not. And the proof is in the footage. As part of a 6-month investigation, the New York Times has collected and forensically analysed thousands of videos, most filmed by the writers themselves. We obtained internal police radio traffic and went to court to unseal police body cam footage. Our reconstruction shows the Capitol riot for what it was: a violent assault encouraged by the president on a seat of democracy that he vowed to protect. We'll chart how police leaders failed to heed warnings of an impending attack, putting rank-and-file officers in danger. We'll track key instigators in the mob, taking advantage of weaknesses in the Capitol's defences to ignite a wave of violence that engulfed the building. We'll show for the first time the many simultaneous points of attack and the 8 breaches of what appeared to be an impenetrable institution of government. We'll show how the delay to secure Congress likely cost a rioter her life, and how for some, storming the Capitol was part of the plan all along.
In fact, tomorrow, I don't even like to say it because I'll be arrested.
Well, let's not say it.
We need to go, I'll say it.
All right.
We need to go in to the Capitol.
Yeah, so that was the intro to the piece. It's a very long 40 minutes. But I wanted to show that for a couple reasons. I mean, I think Toledo spoke about this in his introduction, but obviously, probably some of the rhetoric that you heard from Donald Trump there sounds familiar to some of you all leading up to the election in October. And so I wanted to come in with some really practical tips for how to cover that and how we covered that, and how we prepared to monitor for that day. So whether it be the election day or in this case when the vote was set to be certified, we prepared for those events in the case that something like this might happen. So right before I talk about this, I just wanted to mention part of what you saw in that intro was a lot of the commentary from Trump and his inner circle leading up to the election and to January 6th. And that became really important for us to collect in terms of establishing this kind of cause and effect, and obviously Trump's responsibility for what happened that day. So I'd encourage any of you who are currently covering your election to keep track of everything Bolsonaro is saying about voting machines and such, because it does become really important later in terms of accountability. So this is a screenshot from TweetDeck, for those of you who don't know. If you have a Twitter, you have a TweetDeck. It's basically just another tool that Twitter has that allows you to have multiple Twitter feeds going on at once. And this is a great tool if you're preparing yourself to cover something that you know is coming up, right? So an election is a great example where you'd want to be ready to monitor that. I took a photo of this yesterday, so these are not tweets from January 6th, which is why you see a cat and other less relevant things up there. But the searches are really useful to give you a sense of how we prepared and how you all could prepare similarly.
And you use just search columns or also people's accounts, specific accounts to monitor?
Exactly, yeah. So what you see in these first two columns is just a traditional search. So you can use different types of columns within TweetDeck. So these are searches of hashtags that we knew Trump and his supporters were using on the day of. So that was a really simple, these are things that we want to follow. People who will be there are probably going to be posting from these hashtags. The middle is a list. So a list is basically, you can create your own lists on Twitter of a bunch of users. So in advance of this, our team created a list for Washington, D.C., of anyone we knew might potentially be tweeting from there that could be of interest to us. So it could have been people we thought might participate in the riot because they had been publicizing it, DC police Twitter accounts, the Twitter accounts of local journalists in DC or activists who may be there, so that we could follow this list day of and see tweets from all of those people at once. So it's basically a really curated collection of tweets from DC.
And why did you want so many tweets?
It's a double-edged sword. You want a lot of tweets and you don't want a lot of tweets. Of course, you know, a lot of stuff becomes irrelevant, but in a case like this, obviously for a team that relies on visuals and relies on evidence from social media, the best case for us is to start very broad and collect as much information as we can. And then as you start to analyze it, which I'll show you after this, you can narrow down what's exactly relevant. But casting a really wide net is important. And seeing it in a timeline live is just helpful for you to know when things are happening, right?
And once you found something interesting, you capture it.
Exactly. So we would take from here, and as we were watching, we'd follow. So this one here this is actually not Trump's Twitter account because, as many of you know, his Twitter has been suspended, but on that day, his Twitter was up and he was tweeting throughout, right? So we're following all these different things. The last one is a search of geo-coordinates of the Capitol. So it's capturing any tweets within 1 kilometer of those coordinates. If anyone wants the specifics on that, I can tell you after this. But so we're following all these, and as the day goes on, we're capturing them. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. And this is how we were saving them day of. This is just a Google spreadsheet, nothing fancy.
Seen you Google.
Especially, yeah, thank you, Google, for your sponsorship. So this is what it looked like day of. So very, very simple, right? So we just have time. Time FTG is time footage. So time is time of day it happened. And when we're capturing in real time, we basically just take the time that it's tweeted or the time that it's put on Facebook, which is not necessarily when it was filmed yet, right? We're just doing that to start. Time in the footage is like if it's an 8-hour video, at what point in the 8-hour video you see that. Notes of what we see, the location if we know it, and then the source where we got it from. Super, super simple, not organized at all. The first 24 hours, we were just throwing things into here and saving them. So number one thing, if you're monitoring crime in real time, a lot of that stuff is going to get deleted in the next week, in the next month, so save everything that you're finding.
How many people was doing this at the same time?
So on the day, we had only 2 people assigned to monitor. I mean, we thought something would happen. I don't think we thought it would be as big as it was. And about 2 hours in, those 2 people were like, send in everyone. So pretty much our entire team, which I think was about 6 reporters at the time, started monitoring. And so basically what I showed you for Twitter, we did like similar searches for information on every other platform. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Livestream, Twitch, DLive, Parler, 4chan, grabbing everything and putting it into a spreadsheet like this. And we had one person specifically who was our saving grace, who was taking every single link and downloading as we were finding.
One person just to download everything.
Yes, and I will say, like, in ways we benefit from the resources of the New York Times, and that you can have one person on staff who can do that. But I do want to emphasize, I did this work for 4 years with an academic institution with very few resources. So just as a general umbrella, any of you could do this work. Like I said, this is a Google spreadsheet. It's nothing fancy. And if it's just you, which I did for many years, you manually download everything yourself. Or you find someone who's a coder. I know we have some here who can write code to download it all for you. We can go to the next slide. So this, I know it's very small. I'll explain it. You don't need to be able to read it. This is what our spreadsheet looked like at the end of the process. So this is what it looks like now. We have about 1,000 fields in the spreadsheet. Basically, the benefit of a spreadsheet, especially when you're working on a story that you know is going to be what we refer to as a reconstruct, so telling the full story of what happened that day, a spreadsheet transitions perfectly into a timeline. You can easily organize a spreadsheet and sort it by time, and then suddenly everything is in chronological order. So every single row in this spreadsheet is a piece of evidence, whether that be a time code from a video, a photograph, police radio audio that we were listening to day of. When government officials like the Department of Defense would release their own timeline of events, we would put their times into this as well, because then you can compare the two.
And they were?
Not always accurate. That's why it's really important to have all of your evidence in one place, in my opinion, because you see very early on where the discrepancies are. The Department of Defense says the National Guard got there at 5, but in the video we don't see them there till 5:30, and by that time the Capitol was already cleared, right? So having all the evidence in one place is really useful for that. So it's a similar setup. We have date, time code in the video. This column is the type of evidence it is, so video, audio. Sorry, I realized I was maybe far from the mic. Could everyone hear me? Okay. Document, tweet, all of Trump's tweets are in here as well, so that we could see when he was tweeting, how people were reacting, right? Descriptions, this is quotes, so as we were watching all the footage, we were listening to what people were saying. Again, super important in terms of accountability, right? Because you hear very interesting things, and you hear them responding to what their president is saying. I was telling Toledo earlier, Trump didn't tweet until like 5 p.m. that day, telling people to go home. As soon as he tweeted, you see in the footage, people telling each other to leave, standing in front of doors saying, Trump wants us to go home. Imagine if he had tweeted that 5 hours earlier, right?
So it's not just to document what has happened, but to establish a causal relationship.
Exactly. Cause and effect is super important, especially in a case like this where Trump obviously wasn't there at the Capitol, but his connection and the connection of the people around him was, we knew, going to become very important, and obviously has with the hearings currently going on.
The timeline is the main thing, is that correct?
Yes, this is the baseline of all of our reporting. Spreadsheets are our #1 friend in visual investigations. Like, nothing is better for organizing information than a spreadsheet because, for example, these 2 columns here are for location. So where at the Capitol something happened. On the West Lawn, in the crypt, in the rotunda. And when it's in a spreadsheet like this, you can easily filter things, right? So if I'm a reporter and I'm only interested in what happened in the rotunda, suddenly I can take these 1,000 rows and only see what's relevant to
Maybe
me.
you can explain what's the rotunda.
Yes, I mean, it's not that important. You'll see the map later, but it's the central part of the Capitol, like where there's all the paintings along the wall, where a lot of the kind of famous scenes came out from that day. And then here we have source and where we were saving it to. So this was the holy grail of all of our reporting. And I'm happy to kind of share the backbone of this if people are curious, like the types of fields that we use. Just ask me. And
how many hours did it take to do this?
6 months. This project took 6 months, and the reporting was going up until the day we published, basically, and continues. Our team has published more on the Capitol since. So this is a very live document, especially when you're producing video. For any of you who work on video, editing a video takes a very long time, especially a 40-minute documentary. So while our editor was working on that, all of us were continuing to report and updating the spreadsheet at the same time. And, it seems like every week new information comes out from a testimony or something that we could add to this.
Can you explain in a little bit more detail, how do you know exactly the time when this video and that video was made?
Yes, absolutely. Can we go to the next slide, because that'll help with that. Okay, so obviously if we're building a timeline and we're trying to tell the story of a day, when something happened is really important to know. So there's a few different ways you do that. Some of it is more technical. For those of you who know what metadata is, it's basically the information in any piece of imagery that gives you details about it. So if I took a photo of you all with my phone right now, it would have metadata that said it was taken at this time on this date. So a lot of times we try to get the original video or photo from the source so that we can just see when it was filmed based on their camera.
Did you ask some Trump guy to give you his original footage?
So this is a good question. We didn't, for a few reasons, ask rioters to share their visuals with us directly. Not that any of them would have if we asked. So in that case, if you're just taking videos they posted to social media, if I were to take that photo of you all and put it on Twitter and you downloaded it, it would have no metadata. So it would have no information attached to it. So then I, as a reporter, have to figure out myself when it was filmed. This is one of the ways we do that. So this is a Premiere timeline in Adobe Premiere, which is video editing software. Any kind of video editing software, like there's free versions that don't work exactly this way, but in terms of using it for a reporting tool, I don't edit video myself. This was just for me as a reporter. Basically, what you're seeing here is a bunch of different video clips on a timeline, and they're lined up with when they start and end. So we manually synchronized all of the footage so that we could see when everything happened.
May I?
Yes.
If you don't know the footage from Twitter, as you said, the time, how do you know it was at that time?
Great question. So fortunately for us, there were a lot of people live streaming what happened this day. So live streaming is basically, right, like filming it in live and it's going online at the same time that you're filming it. So people were live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, and the beauty of a live stream is you know exactly when it started. And so if there's an 8-hour live stream of what's happening at the Capitol, of which there were many, that is an 8-hour, basically like historical document of what happened in those times. Of course, there's like some buffering based on the internet, but generally it's accurate, right? So you can take an 8-hour live stream, and then if you have a 1-minute video that wasn't filmed live, so you have no idea when it was, but you see in that video the guy with the blue hat and the red shirt hitting that police officer with his flag, and you can find that exact same moment of the guy in the blue hat and the red shirt hitting that police officer with the flag in the live stream. Suddenly, you can synchronize the two, and now you know that clip based on the time in the live stream. So that's essentially what you see here. Usually the really long clips are live streams, and then these shorter ones are small clips that we found elsewhere that we aligned within that.
Doing a little bit of recap, so the live streaming is kind of your Bible.
Yes.
As the truth.
Exactly, the baseline.
Yeah, but, and when you have a video that doesn't appear in the live stream, how do you do?
So yeah, sometimes you just won't be able to find out when something was filmed, and there's a couple ways to go about that. I mean, in any investigation, sometimes you just might not be able to crack the code of one video, and then it doesn't end up in the story. But there are a lot of workarounds, right? Like, obviously, we do traditional reporting as well. That's very important to us. None of this is a replacement for speaking to humans. So we had reporters at the Capitol that day. We interviewed people that were there, staffers, police officers, and that can help fill in the gaps if you're not sure when something happened, of course. It's also just about like having multiple forms of corroboration. So if you have, you know, a few different angles of video that show the same thing, And then you see another video that's, like you can't find the exact moment in the live stream, but all the same people are there, like wearing the same clothes. You can tell it's the same group. That gives you enough information to know, okay, it's kind of around this time. And that's enough for me to use it and feel that it's legitimate. Obviously, one part of this is just verifying that any of this information is real in the first place. So there's a few different ways to go about that, but we're very fortunate for the amount of live streams that were happening that day.
So just to recap another thing, you said this is not the editing of the final product. It's just a tool for you to know what happened, when happened, and see it in the right timeline.
Yes, exactly. So obviously, because this is a video, we had an editor, Dimitri. He is a genius. And you'll notice he's the first person in the byline of this piece because editing this piece was a monster.
How many videos?
Thousands of videos. I mean, just from Parler, there were thousands, as I'm sure many of you followed the dump of the Parler information. And that was just one source. So thousands. And that man, Dima, has watched more footage of the Capitol than I think anyone on planet Earth. But this is separate from his editing timeline, right? Like this was a reporting tool for us that we used. And I'd really encourage you to kind of like expand the type of tools that you're using. Like I said, there's like free versions of software that you can use, and all you need is something that allows you to line up clips together.
Let's see what you did with this.
Yeah, we'll show another clip that gives you a sense of how you end up.
The real thing.
Yeah.
This is a critical moment. Officers must now defend the outside and inside of the building, stretching them even further. Simultaneous events now happen that are critical to lawmakers' safety. Rioters head straight for the Senate and will be at its doors in 2 minutes. Above them, the Senate is called into recess.
Boss, protesters are in the building. Thank you.
Members will evacuate down these stairs. In this hallway directly overhead the rioters, Officer Eugene Goodman is sprinting to overtake them. He passes Mitt Romney, who he warns to turn around. Reinforcements are following behind. Goodman overtakes the mob, goes downstairs and intercepts them. He holds them off while backup arrives upstairs. Behind these rioters and just feet away is an escape route where lawmakers and Senate staff are now fleeing. Just one officer stands guard. Keeping his composure, Goodman draws the mob away from that escape route to where reinforcements are waiting.
Keep it, motherfucker! He's one person! We're down! Second floor!
He glances toward the Senate and realizes a door is unguarded. Goodman shoves the protester again, lures the mob away, and brings them into that line of fellow officers. Again, the rioters here are convinced it's their duty to defend democracy. The officers hold them off here, for now. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Capitol, a few political leaders are evacuated from the House of Representatives. But despite a lockdown alert, proceedings here will resume.
The House will be in order.
We'll go there soon. First, we'll go to the crypt in the center of the Capitol, below the rotunda. The mob is already at its entrance. If they get through here, they will more easily fan out across the building. Rioters jostle with police here for 6 minutes, and then flood through. It's now 2:24 p.m., some 90 minutes after the siege began, and the mob is about to overrun the building.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
As this is happening, and as thousands more swell outside, Trump composes a tweet. not to calm his supporters, but to blame his vice president. He writes, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. At this very time, Pence and his family are being taken to safety, along with an aide who's carrying the country's nuclear launch equipment. At 2:25 p.m., there's another major breach on the opposite side of the building, the east side. Rioters have been battling a handful of officers at these doors for almost half an hour. The tide turns when rioters who came through the crypt reach these doors and pull them open. Then an active duty Marine Corps officer, Christopher Warner-Gearis, keeps that door open for the mob to flood in.
So that Officer Goodman was kind of a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so this is, once you see everything put together, you see why a timeline becomes really important, right? Those videos of Officer Goodman, a few of them, not all of them, but he went viral. I'm sure some of you saw those videos. And of course, people had a sense right away that he, like, you know, reacted in an amazing way to all of this, but you don't see how intense and how close it really was until everything is minute by minute. You know, like that shot of the other officer behind him and you see the representatives evacuating, knowing exactly when that was compared to when he met the rioters, it tells a very scary story of how close this came to being so much worse.
This is real time, what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly second by second.
Yeah, there's of course, you know, the riot itself was many hours, so it's not fully, but it is chronological and you're seeing things as they took place. And it was really important for us to continue to point out, you know, for example, we had that takeaway where we were saying what President Trump was tweeting at the time. And this, not everything made it into the piece, but what's interesting, obviously, the fact that Pence was evacuating at the same time as that tweet is very telling. But something else we saw is, you know, in all of the videos, a minute later, like he tweets at 2:24, 2:25, everyone in the crowd is, excuse my language, fuck Pence. Pence certified the election. We need to get into the Capitol. Donald Trump says Pence certified. People are reacting in real time to what he was saying. And it's very terrifying. And it's also, again, like I keep saying, you know, we always say that we do accountability journalism. That's important for accountability. So that's, you know, why it became really important to see everything together. You see the cause and effect of the crowd too, right? The second breach happened because of the people who came in through the first breach. They ran through the entire building to open that door for everyone else. So just knowing kind of how like the mob effect took hold, it's really interesting, and you know it says a lot about the political state of the U.S. as well.
And was some kind of coordination for the guy to go and open the doors.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a question that has continued to come up a lot is how coordinated this attack was. My answer after having reported on this for almost 2 years is we still don't know. There are a lot of groups that came there that day with certain intentions. We have a lot of reporting specifically on some of those groups, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers. But what's most interesting and what I think we got the most out of timelining it in this way is actually like what the rest of the mob was doing. Like all of those people who weren't part of the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys, how they were interacting with each other, how they were helping each other. And again, what it says about the state of American politics, like these are what, you know, extremist groups online refer to as quote unquote normies. Like these are supposed to be the regular Trump supporters. And yet these are the people that are working in tandem to break into the Capitol in this way. It's quite striking to see.
So let's recapitulate again. And first, the plan is a major thing. If you don't have a plan, you won't be able to do any of this. You have to know what you are going to do and plan in advance. So Beraba is all right. He knows what he's doing. The second, how do you... This is a team effort, clearly. Can you talk a little about that? Who does what, and how do you do it being in your house and each and one of you in their house?
Yeah, so a huge part of visual investigations is collaboration. Just like the number one tenet for us, we're probably like one of a very small number of desks at the New York Times where every byline will have like 10 names in it. And it's because something like this takes so many people. You know, obviously there's the editor, like I spoke of, and we had another editor, Natalie. We have our animator who made those amazing graphics of the Capitol that you saw, which becomes really important. Like you asked earlier, nobody knows what the rotunda is. But in terms of establishing how this happened, it becomes really relevant for people to know what this building looks like and to follow that closely, and you need somebody with those skills to do that. And then we had the entire reporting team, which, like I said, it was 5 of us plus like 20 other New York Times reporters who contributed. But the way we, you know, kind of divided the work early on was like, okay, everyone take one social media platform and find all you can on it, right? And then as you move forward, we kind of crystallized certain reporting focuses. So one person on our team focused on the extremist groups, tracking the members of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, identifying the people. My focus became the police response. There were a lot of questions about that, of course. Why the law enforcement wasn't more prepared for this, given the chatter online that had happened previously, especially following the Black Lives Matter protests of the previous summer when they were seemingly very prepared and militarized, and not so much in this case here. So one of my main tasks was listening to all the police radio. So that was one thing that I focused on entirely, listening to the public channels and also working sources within Congress to get private police chatter. Another person focused specifically on the really violent battles of the day. So as you all know, a police officer died that day, Officer Brian Sicknick. Several rioters died that day, one of them Roseanne Boyland. I had a colleague who focused specifically on those incidents to kind of figure out exactly what happened. So that was how we divided the work, but it was very much a major team effort, and there's just no way that you could do this alone, given how much information there was.
And there was a plan also to when we are going to publish this. How do you say enough is enough?
It's really hard to decide when you're done with the piece. I mean, I think that's true for all journalism. I'm sure you've all, like, it kind of feels like you're, you know, giving birth or something and you don't know if it's ready to go out into the world. I think it's, you know, it's a...
Usually 9 months.
Yeah. This was a preemie, 6 month baby. But it's a mixture of a few things. I think this is one reason why collaboration is really important as well, is like, it's hard to know when you're done if it's just you. But if you have 6 people watching it and weighing in on different parts, then you can feel more comfortable that, like, okay, we fact-checked everything is airtight because 6, 7, 8 people have looked at this and worked on this. I think also just like, obviously the external pressures impact when you decide to publish and when makes sense to put information out there. Like I said, we published this 6 months after this happened, and you know, we had a concern when we were publishing it, is anyone going to care 6 months after this happened? You know, does everyone feel like they already know what happened? So obviously we didn't want to wait too far out from the event before publishing. I think it was the perfect amount of time to feel like we were very comprehensive in our reporting, but it also was still fresh enough for people that they wanted to watch it. But like I said, our reporting on this has continued to this day, so you're never entirely done.
So, just a brief in Português. Eu pedi para as pessoas de laranja, os nossos valorosos auxiliares, pegarem as perguntas por escrito para a gente depois juntar todas e fazer aqui a maior quantidade possível para tirar todas as dúvidas que a Hayley puder tirar. can we move on to the next piece?
Yeah.
Or is there any other thing that you want to talk about, January the 6th? Any other tips for who is preparing for the same?
I have a lot of tips. I'm hoping that people will have questions. Do we want to do questions now, or should I talk about this first?
Let's move on, then I ask the questions.
Okay, great.
Podemos começar, então. Agora a gente vai mudar o assunto, vai falar sobre uma reportagem mais recente sobre a guerra na Ucrânia, que eles fizeram, o massacre de Bucha, ou Bucha.
Just a slight graphic warning. There's nothing too graphic in this because it's bad quality, but there are bodies lying on the street. So if you want to close your eyes or anything, do what you need to do. Okay, go ahead.
Твою мать, это они бежали просто. Связанными руками.
Как патриот делает. Мы вообще зеленого потеряли.
So I'll give some backstory on that. Some of you may already know this was pretty heavily reported on. Bucha is a town right outside of the capital in Ukraine, Kyiv, which was basically controlled by the Russians for about a month. And at the end of March, early April, the Russians pulled out. And suddenly a lot of videos that looked like this started to appear online. So obviously what you see here is this is the Ukrainian military driving through the streets in Bucha and what appear to be, sadly, many human bodies lying in the street. This type of footage is like paramount to what visual investigations does, because this came out and right away Russia was saying, this is fake. This footage is fake. The first thing they said is these are actors. They're lying in the street for the video. They tried to point out that the people were moving, none of which was true. Then they changed their story to the Ukrainians killed these people. No one died when we were there. The Ukrainians did this after we left, and now we're being framed. So as a visual investigations team, that is a great question for us to answer. Maybe Russia is telling the truth. But we want to find out what happened, right? Did this happen when the Russians were there, or is what Russia's saying possibly the case? So going in with multiple hypotheses. So how do we do that? On a baseline, so we wanted to answer this question quite quickly because of the misinformation going around. And we weren't going to be able to get someone into Bucha that quickly. We have had a field team in there since that have continued to do great reporting. But to answer this question quickly, we wanted to verify this footage, essentially, right? So the first question we want to answer, is this actually in Bucha? This could have been filmed anywhere. This could be in another part of Ukraine, maybe it's in Russia, maybe it's in Philadelphia. So first question, where? And to answer that, we do what is referred to as geolocation. How do you find where a video was filmed? So I'll show you through the process now. If you could just click once. Good. So for 1 second in this video, you see the military drive by a sign here which has some Ukrainian writing on it. I don't speak or read Ukrainian. I have people on our team that do, fortunately. But as I mentioned earlier, with my listening to the sessions here, Google Translate is a very helpful tool. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. This is a screen recording This is not real time. It took me longer to do this in real time, but I basically wanted to recreate what I did. I just used Google Translate to type the Cyrillic characters as I saw them here. Again, I don't know what it says, but you can visually match the letters, right? So it says townhouse. Great. So they drive by a townhouse at some point. I go to Google, type in that word townhouse, and then in Ukrainian Bucha. I'm assuming this is in Bucha to start with, right? I go to Google Maps, another great tool. There's a lot of townhouses in Bucha, actually. It's quite a nice neighborhood. And what I basically started doing was clicking through every single one of these townhouses, looking for a match to what I saw in the video. Really simple, right? Like, these are all open tools. It's basically just knowing how to search really well, right? And then I come across this one. This looks interesting to me. It kind of looks similar. The houses are really like pushed up against each other. This is actually promotional material. So it's like animated versions of the houses, but before they were built. But you can see actually houses quite similar these look, right? These kind of large windows, the angular brick pattern, and the black roof. So I'm going to start with this. I think it might be this. Take the address, go back into Google Maps, and then what I'm going to do is drop myself in Street View. So Street View is basically like what you would see from the ground level. This doesn't exist for everywhere, but for Ukraine there is Street View imagery. It's old, it's from 2015, but it's there. So I'm just going to drop myself on the street that I think this is on. And then what do I do next in this video? Walk down the street and try to match features that I see with the video, right? So you see this green fencing on the side and this building here with a red roof and kind of like a brick overlay. If you click to the next slide, you can see it again. So this is the Street View image from Google. And if you just click once more, this is from the video. So overlaid over. So we have the location now. First question answered. This is in Bucha for sure. This is 100% in Bucha, Ukraine. The second question, of course, is the bodies. Hypothetically, maybe they are actors, right? So we really want to answer that question. So part of that question is when this happened. How long have the bodies been there? Because if these are actors, they were probably laying there for 5 minutes while the video was filmed and weren't there otherwise. And in terms of Russia's other claim that it was Ukraine that killed them, we also want to know when it happened. Did it happen when Russia was in control of Bucha or when Ukraine came back? You can head to the next slide. Click once more, please. This is a statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense, their official telegram. And they said some pretty interesting things. So they said not a single resident suffered from violent action while they were in control of Bucha. And they gave us an exact date when they left. We left March 30th. We were in control until March 30th, then we left. Had nothing to do with Bucha after that. Again, this is a great claim for us to fact check. Okay, Russia says they left March 30th, so were these bodies there before that? For that, you can go to the next slide. We went to satellite imagery. I've heard lots of mentions of satellite imagery already at this conference, especially in regards to Amazon reporting, so I know some of you are familiar with it. This is a satellite image over Bucha. This is the street. Those triangular buildings up there are the townhouse that we just located. So we got high-res imagery of this street, and we basically looked in the imagery for the bodies. Could you click once more, please? So here, in what looks to be quite grainy imagery, I might actually stand up and point because it's kind of hard to see. You see a few what really look like spots
Pode diminuir pouco a luz, por favor?
On the street. And, of course, you can't tell from this image that they're bodies. But what we do see are something is lying on the street in this image. This image is from March 18th, so before the Russians pulled out, 12 days before the Russians pulled out. This is interesting to us. My hypothesis is that those are the bodies that we see in the street and that they've in fact been laying there for weeks then. And that means very likely that these people, unfortunately, are dead. How do we confirm that? corroborating multiple sources, right? So now I have video and I have a satellite image. Can I compare the two to confirm that these spots that we're seeing are in fact the bodies? If you could play the next video. Oh, sorry, one before this. Here's a comparison of imagery from February 28th. So that's before the Russians came. This is March 19th. And I'll show you in the next video how we know that they are, in fact, the bodies. What we basically did is we lined up the footage with the satellite imagery, and we checked to see that every one of those spots lined up exactly with where the bodies were. And that ended up being the case. So this is confirmation for me. I feel very confident that we're seeing the bodies in the satellite image from before March 30th that we see in the video. This video was filmed in April. So we published this with basically the information being these people were killed in Bucha while Russia was in control of Bucha. That is fact, and it's really important because it goes against what the Russian military was saying happened. I do want to emphasize, though, that this did not tell us how these people died. So knowing that they were there at a certain time doesn't tell me who killed them. Maybe they were executed by the Russians. Maybe they were killed by errant Ukrainian shelling into Bucha, right? So when we published this, we were very clear about what we did not know yet. But it was important to publish because we had disproven the Russian narrative. And I'll say we're continuing to report on this to answer that question of how people actually died. And that requires a lot more work and a lot of field work. But this was the visual investigation's way to say what Russia is saying happened here is false. And that's really important, especially with a war going on.
Well, we have a problem. There are too many questions.
Well, if anyone wants to ask me after, if your question doesn't get read.
But I will do my best to ask most of them. And we will start with the more specific ones.
Yeah.
So I won't give names because some of you gave names, some not. So they are asking if you could elaborate about how was monitoring on Facebook, because the search engine is quite different from Twitter. And can you elaborate on that?
Great question. Facebook is the most annoying social media platform in terms of searching. Sorry if there's any Facebook reps here. Come talk to me. Facebook is a great platform, though. There's a lot of information. It's just really hard to find information. So there's a few different ways. Searching for groups can be really useful, but the number one tip I give for Facebook searching is actually searching it through Google. So I'm trying to, hopefully verbally explaining this won't be too confusing, but if you want me to write it down for you later, I will. There's a specific search on Google, which is site, S-I-T-E, : and then you can put the name of a website after it. So site, : facebook.com, no spaces. If you search that with then a search term like January 6th, #StopTheSteal, Google is being told to search that website for those words. So if I did site, S-I-T-E, : facebook.com, and then rotunda, and search that, Google is going to pull up results for me all from Facebook that say the word rotunda in it. And the really nice thing is that on Google, you can then narrow the search by date. So with Google, you can say it only look for posts on January 6th. Facebook is really hard to search by date. So that is a great way to use another tool to get your way into Facebook. And tomorrow, you should go to these lovely people's OSINT training because they'll show you like how to do that in real time. Yeah, site, : like the ... and then the name of the site, no spaces in any of that.
Any tips for filtering out the huge amount of spam that emerge when you are monitoring trending hashtags like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You're going to get spam. The one thing that I will say that we like to do, because we are a visual team, so we're more interested in visual content on TweetDeck, so that thing I showed you first, you can set in your search, like when you make a column, there's a little settings thing at the top corner where you can set different things. You can set for all tweets with media. So it'll basically take out any tweets that are just text. Those might become important to you at some point if you want to see what people were talking about. But just in terms of collecting visuals, I do that a lot, is just minimizing my search only for media content, so videos and photos.
Did you have some hard time to get things done? Was there any missing piece? How did you solve it?
Oh God, there were so many missing pieces. It's hard to even think about them now. I mean, definitely, like, you can only get so much from open source information, so like the videos that people are posting online. And it became quickly important to us to try to dig deeper than that. So you saw in there that we had police body camera footage, security camera footage from inside the Capitol building, police audio that was encrypted, so wasn't publicly available. That was really hard to get. It takes a lot of sourcing. It takes a lot of convincing people to give it to you. But it's sometimes the most useful information because, for example, like a police body camera video has the time code down to the second on all of the footage. So I would say, like, in this case, actually, a lot of the human sourcing was quite difficult, but it really paid off to kind of fill in the holes where things were missing. I think, honestly, the biggest challenge with this, which is not a good answer because it's pretty meta, is just like how much content there was. Usually on the visual investigations team, we struggle because there's not enough content. Like, we tell visual stories, and if there's not enough visuals, it makes it really hard to put a piece together. In this case, it was the polar opposite. It was just too much information. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever sat down and watched a 9-hour live stream, but it's incredibly painful to do so. So that was the hardest part, is watching all of that, and then out of all of that, like thousands of hours of footage, deciding what's actually relevant and important. And that's where our reporting questions came in. Like, where was Trump involved? Like, when were people responding to what he was saying? Where did we see failures in law enforcement? Where did it feel like the crowd was particularly organized? Like, having those central questions helps you kind of narrow down from all of the muck.
People are asking for you to elaborate more and be more specific, if you can, about how did you get the police to cooperate with you?
Oh, the police didn't cooperate with us for obvious reasons. Yeah, so we actually did a piece entirely separate from this about the police response. And I do want to clarify, like, this wasn't a case where it was necessarily like we were bashing on the response of rank and file police officers. It's interesting because when the riot first happened, what a lot of people were saying was, the police just let them in. Like, the police were in on it. There were some cases where the police stood to the side, but our general findings were that the police were fighting. They were trying to stop these people from getting inside. The problem was that they didn't have the resources to do so. And that's an even more interesting question, because why didn't they? Why didn't somebody prepare for this? So we did an entire piece about the police response, which was using police audio. That was encrypted audio, and we didn't get that from the police. They didn't give that to us. We got that from somebody in Congress who'd been collecting information for the impeachment trial, and they gave us that. And we took that police audio, we lined it up with footage so that people could see what was happening as you're hearing the police basically asking for more resources over and over and over again. It's really hard to listen to. But the interesting thing is, like, that's a piece that it wasn't about what the officers were doing at the time. It was a larger piece about why was nobody prepared for this, and we actually wanted to interview the main officer who was kind of in charge of the response that day, and he refused to be interviewed. So the police did not cooperate with us is the answer to that question.
Today, would you change anything that you've done, you and your team? How did the organization, the flow?
I would say we have a long way to go in terms of how we organize information, frankly. Like, it looks impressive seeing that spreadsheet, but I can tell you I could name like 10 people off the top of my head that organize information in a better way than we do. Just in terms of like how you collect information, how you archive it. So like I was saying about things getting deleted, like how you save all of that information, where it goes, how you keep track of things. We're like pretty lackluster in some of that, to be honest. It's very much like responding in real time. How do we just get it all as fast as we can? But there are ways to like automate some of those processes, make sure everything ends up in the right place, make sure everything is more organized. Like that spreadsheet, like I've seen spreadsheets that are much, much nicer than that spreadsheet. So it's something that we're continuing to work on, is like how we keep track of information. But obviously, as long as everything is in service to the story at the end, it's not the most important thing.
Did you ask for authorization for the use of the footage to anybody?
Yes and no. So, in some cases, for example, we used footage that was filmed by freelance journalists who were there. Obviously, in those cases, we asked, and sometimes we'll then pay if people want payment. In the case of rioters, we didn't ask for obvious reasons. Some of the police footage, some of that we got through court cases, so then we were allowed to use it. Some of it we got through sources in Congress, so we didn't really have police permission. But what kind of protects us more generally is fair use policy. So I don't know how it works in Brazil, but in the US, journalists have fair use ability to use information for news purposes. So even if you don't have, it's the same here? Okay, yeah. So even if you don't have permission, you can use it under certain rules, right? So the rule that's most relevant to us is if you're being transformative with the information. So if you're using it to show something different. So the way that we annotate footage, the way that we narrate footage usually protects us in using footage without having permission. Another is, for example, using only a small amount. So if you have an 8-hour live stream, but you're only using 5 minutes of it, you're pretty legally safe to use it without permission.
What was the most difficult part of the job?
Definitely the amount of content, which I said before, but actually what I want to say on a more serious note with both the stories I showed, the mental toll of watching all of this content is a lot. It's really distressing. Obviously, if you're looking at dead bodies, it's really distressing. But even in the case of the Capitol, like I mentioned, it was really important for us to listen to what people were saying in terms of establishing accountability, thinking about the chain of events. But listening to 8-hour live streams of people like this talking about how they're feeling and why they're doing it, it is seriously mentally draining. I have had so many dreams of Proud Boys, I can't even tell you. It's really hard, and it's hard in the same way that interviewing the family member of somebody who's been executed is hard. It's just a different type of reporting. But I would really encourage anyone who's doing this work to check in with yourself, practice resiliency, and my former job at the Human Rights Center at Berkeley was, really made that a priority. And what I always say, journalists suffer from a lot of guilt of why am I feeling bad about this? I'm not the person whose family member was killed in Bucha. And it's a good question to ask. We have to be aware of our privilege, but at the end of the day, you taking a break or you acknowledging that you feel bad is a practice in sustainability. We want to do this job for longer. You can help more people if you can report for 40 years instead of 10. And so, really take care of yourself if you're watching this footage. It's hard.
Was there any special strategy to distribute this content in the social networks?
Yeah, one thing which I really love about visual investigations is at least the video pieces, the non-written pieces, all go on YouTube, so it's not paywalled. Obviously, there's a lot of debate about the subscription system, paywalls, and I totally see both sides of it. But I am very proud to say that visual investigations content, you can watch it for free on YouTube. So we share a lot of content through social media. We share it through our sources. We do a lot of international coverage outside of Day of Rage. For example, the Bucha piece. When we do international stories, we always try and get them translated, so publishing it in that language or getting subtitles in that language so that we can share it with those communities. It's pretty grassroots, and most of the people that do open source work are very online, are very on social media, and that's where we like to share our content as well.
Now, more general questions. When working on such a big and possibly historic event, how do you avoid to get just one side of the narrative, one at a time?
Yeah, always go into anything with multiple hypotheses is my answer. Like I said with the Bucha case, we didn't go into that automatically saying Russia's lying. You have to go into something knowing that the answer could be anything. Another case is with the police response, right? I think inherently after the Capitol, when everyone said the police were in on it, the police let them in, it might be easy to believe that that's true because we have seen police behavior. I've covered a lot of policing in the US, and there are a lot of examples of police not responding in the way they should. So it might be your inherent response to be oh yeah, the police just let them in. But if you actually report it out, that's not the case. Like, some of these officers were pretty much fighting to the death to not let these people inside. And again, like, asking those questions and not falling into the easiest response, you get to more interesting questions, which is, okay, how come police officers prepared crazily for Black Lives Matter protests and not for this? Like, that, to me, is a more fascinating question than just like, why did the police let them in? So I would just, encourage you to have an open mind. And like, 50% of investigations don't get published because what we think we're going to find, we don't find. That's just the reality, and you have to be open to that being the reality.
So the credibility of the press is a major issue all around the world, and like the new Reuters Institute showed us. And do you plan to make possible to people to see all the material that you have?
It's a good question. I have a couple answers to this. So I think the credibility question is super important, and it's something that we take really seriously in visual investigations. I get, overwhelmingly when we publish, I get a response that's, I hate the New York Times, but I love visual investigations. I obviously don't subscribe to that belief. I think there's lots of great reporting at the Times, but it tells a very interesting story about like why people perceive us as credible, and it's because a lot of the information is public. Like, of course, some of it we got through court cases or sources in Congress, but most of what you see in Day of Rage is publicly available information. It's publicly available satellite imagery. It's publicly available maps of the Capitol. It's publicly available live streams and videos and photos. So you can say to someone, if you don't trust me, go watch it for yourself. All of this is out there, and you can do the exact same reporting that I did and come to your own conclusion. I think also, you know, that people respond to that transparency well. In terms of like publishing everything we use, you know, we've had conversations where, you know, we did one story tracking the sale of protective equipment like masks, PPE, from China that was being made with forced labor to the US and otherwise, and we identified a few companies involved, and we didn't actually name all of the companies in the reporting. And people kept asking us, can you share all the companies? Can you share all the companies? We have like legal reasons for doing like this. Am I breaking? Oh, okay. For when we can share data and when we can't. But I personally subscribe to the belief that we should always try to be as transparent as we can be with our methodology and with our data sources, and we really try to do that.
What type of event is more suited to be an investigation, a visual investigation?
Great question. Obviously, if it's visual, but seriously, I mean, like we have like an acronym that we use for when we think about stories. VORI, visual, original, revelatory, and impact. So if a story is visual, so are there visual, and that doesn't just mean videos. It could be like satellite imagery, or it could be like, oh, this is a story we could tell really well with animation, right? Just something that will have a visual element. Original, so is this going to be something new? Revelatory, what is it going to show people they didn't know before? And impact is probably what's most important to us. So like, will there be some accountability from this? A great visual investigation, like the very baseline model of a visual investigation is someone in power says something, evidence doesn't show that's true. Like that is very basically what we do. Just to give an example, like some stories don't fit well for visual investigation. I personally am very interested in covering US airstrikes in Somalia. I've done some previous work on that. It's really important to me. We do a lot of civilian casualty work related to the US military in visual investigations. But in the case of Somalia, it's just not visual. Like you're not getting photos and videos out of there. The satellite imagery is really old. People who do have cell phones are very often related to Al-Shabaab. So that's a story we haven't been able to crack. It requires ground reporting. It requires a different approach. And so there's definitely, you know, stories that fit better than others.
How many projects do you do at the same time?
Depends. So during Day of Rage, for example, that took 6 months. I think I probably produced like 5 stories while producing Day of Rage, some of which were smaller. So we did a few like small Capitol stories. Like I said, we did one only on the police response. And then I did a story on the protests in Myanmar and a story on the humanitarian crisis in Mozambique in the midst of producing Day of Rage. Right now, I'm currently only working on one investigation, a really long-term investigation. Sometimes the news gets crazy and you're producing like one story a day. Like we have bite-sized visual investigations and then we have Day of Rage. So it really just depends on the news cycle, what's going on. It could be anywhere from like 4 stories to 1. And sometimes none. Sometimes, like you're just looking for your next story, which is the best place to be in.
How do you do visual investigations independently outside of the New York Times?
You can do it, first of all. Like I said earlier, I did this long before I was at the New York Times. There are a lot of amazing guides and experts out there. Like the beauty of this type of work is not only is the information open source, but the methodology and the people are like really open source. Like the people that do this want to share their knowledge. They want to collaborate with you. I hate telling people to get on Twitter because it's kind of a terrible place. But if you want to do this type of work, get on Twitter. Like everybody who does this is on Twitter, and it's a really open community. There's a lot of guides and resources out there. A group called Bellingcat, which is like an investigative collective. They publish like how-tos, how to do geolocation, like what I showed you with that Bucha video. Amnesty International Citizen Lab has good resources. More and more journalism schools are doing this. We have a J School Berkeley professor sitting in the front row who teaches a class on this. But it's really open, and it's a process of doing. Like, this is something you learn by doing. I always tell people, if you want to pick up these skills before applying them to an investigation, text 10 of your friends right now, tell them to send you a photo of where they are, geolocate them. Great. Now you've just practiced geolocation. And the tools baseline are really accessible. Google Earth, Google Spreadsheets, TweetDeck. Obviously they're expensive tools that can be helpful, but anyone can do this. It's a really low barrier to entry, and it can have a lot of impact on your work. So I would super encourage you to seek out those resources.
Why the hell the Vice President of the United States was with their nuclear codes with him?
Great question. God knows. There's just rules about where it's called the nuclear football in the U.S., about where it is and with who at all times, and it just happened to be there in that moment, which is obviously terrifying. I don't think the rioters were going in there looking for the nuclear codes, but it is we pointed it out for a reason. It's just it amps up the this could have been really bad. It was bad, and it could have been so much worse. So yeah, the nuclear codes could be anywhere.
How does it work, the relationship between your team and the other parts of the New York Times concerning this investigation, for instance? Does they use your material to do their pieces, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's very much collaboration in both directions. So in the case of Day of Rage, we did a lot of collaboration with our colleagues in DC. The connections that we were able to get some of the body cam footage and some of the police audio. We have colleagues that all they do is report on Congress and report on the Metro Police. We obviously dug into those resources, and they were very willing to help us. And the opposite was true. I think when the Capitol riot happened, honestly, we were the first team that anybody went to, and it's because it was clear from 1 minute in that this was a visual story, and that you had to understand how to analyze and watch all of this footage if you wanted to know what happened. It's a really collaborative effort. A lot of times we will see something that's interesting related to an airstrip in, I'll just use Somalia since they're in Somalia, and we might go to Abdi, who's our East Africa reporter, with we think this could be a good collaboration. We really enjoy that form of collaboration, and it definitely does move in both directions. And it's happening a lot more now that people actually understand visual investigations. When I joined the Times in 2019, I don't think anybody really knew yet what we did, but now it's clear, and there's a lot of ongoing conversation about how we all work together.
Well, this is interesting question. Talking about collaboration, do you know about anything about the participation of Eduardo Bolsonaro in the events on January the 6th?
I can say that's something that I heavily dug into, so if anyone else has, please drop your tips. But I am very curious to see about the coverage that you all do going up to your election. I mean, seeing all this talk about the voting machines, it's very familiar, so yeah.
So, you talked about how many people in the U.S., especially Republicans, don't believe in the results of the election, and we have the same problem here concerning the voting machines. And the question is very broad, but how do you recover from this kind of disbelief in democracy?
I wish I knew the answer. Yeah, it's a really hard question, and it's kind of terrifying to think about in the U.S. context, in the Brazilian context, in the context of a lot of countries that are experiencing something similar right now. On our end, I feel like all we can do is try to put the truthful information out there and hope that it reaches the right people. Like, there is just an information war online for the minds and hearts of these people. Like, the way that these people were radicalized, it's online, it's on the internet, it's in these internet rabbit holes, and all we can do is try to, like, sneak in there with the correct information. And, you know, it goes back to credibility. Like, there's some people's mind who you're never going to change. That's the reality. But there are people that are, like, sitting there in the middle and, like, truly believe this and just are kind of waiting to get that information put in front of them that might change their mind. And, like, that's why we take being transparent in our methodology very seriously. It's why, like, you know, a question I get asked a lot is, like, are you guys trying to, like, replace traditional and human reporting with this? The answer is no, never. God, no. Like, that is the most important part of our work still. But the reason why this is super valuable is because for naysayers and people who don't want to believe something, it's really easy for them, if you have a story based on only human sources, to say, like, those people are lying. That source is lying. That source was paid to say this. That source is traumatized, so they don't remember what happened. But what if you can then say, actually, like, 1,000 videos back up what these sources are saying? Again, it's not going to change everyone's mind, but if you can just add to that level of corroboration, like, what we do is meant to back up those human sources and get to those people who will try as hard as they can to deny the reality. And, I mean, we hope it can have an impact, but yeah, it's definitely, I'm not going to lie, it's looking pretty dark in terms of, like, U.S. democracy and the direction it's going in, so we'll see.
Well, let's try to do an exercise. Let's assume that you have a new assignment to cover, let's say, Brazilian election. And there might be some confusion during the election day or the days after. How would you prepare for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, start your research now, start early. Like, something that we did for the U.S., and obviously this was coverage of the certification, but we were covering on election day, expecting something might happen. Nothing crazy happened on that day, but like something we did, which could apply to the Brazilian context, is like really think hard about what hotspots might be for some type of violence to break out. Like which polling stations do we expect could be especially contentious, where there might be like observers who are harassing voters, or where we're concerned that people might not have access to voting because of a specific reason geographically where it is. And we set up Twitter lists, like I showed you, for every single one of those locations so that we can monitor like Arizona, Philadelphia, whatever we thought those hotspots were going to be. So thinking regionally, which is very hard in a very big country like the US or Brazil, but that's one thing I would encourage. Embedding yourself, unfortunately, in the online communities where these people are, it's not mentally nice, but it does then make it easier for you to kind of search what they're saying and like prepare like the hashtags that you're going to want to search for from day of, because I guarantee you they're sharing them on their Facebook pages or their WhatsApp groups or wherever they are. So yeah, just like really getting into the mindset of the people you're covering, the places where you might expect something to happen, and then hope that nothing does happen.
But you said something that was important to me about the police, because you didn't expect what. It's like the black swan. Nobody saw, so how do you predict that? So in this case, what did you learn about the police that we can use in Brazilian case about how to respond if there's some kind of invasion of the tribunal, electoral tribunal in Brazil? What kind of thing that we can do to prepare for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, following that everything law enforcement is saying is really important, like keeping track of every single statement they put out and everything that they're saying. It's really important to have a record of that so that you can either prove or contradict that in the future. I think like in the case of January 6th, there were major law enforcement failures. It went a lot into like us, that was a lot of human sourcing, is seeking out like what kind of warnings were people in law enforcement getting prior? Like what types of reports did they have access to that they didn't act on? I think, you know, in the case of January 6th, they were poorly prepared and they didn't respond properly, and there was a lot of delay on getting the National Guard there. But in the end, law enforcement did try to stop it. I know here there's the added concern that the military or police could be in the other direction, yeah. Right? That obviously adds another terrifying layer, and it requires a lot of diligence and, again, like sourcing up in those communities. And I've done, not in the January 6th case, but I've done a lot of coverage of policing and police misconduct in the US, and also I cover protests a lot, like all throughout the world. And you know, it's just a product of collecting everything that you're seeing, and especially in the case of policing, actually, like everything that you are seeing, collect it. Because you might just think that that one video of like the police officer shooting someone is the most important, but like if you just publish that, you're gonna get like, oh, that person was just about to shoot me, or that person was coming at me. When you're reporting on police and military, having the full context is super, super, super important. So like get the live stream that captures the 2 hours before that, that proves that that person was actually peaceful and doing nothing. Yeah, I mean, covering the military and police is really, really hard, and also can be dangerous in a lot of ways, but I will hope for the best for all of you. I mean, that's all I can say. I hope for the best for all of us, seriously. And I will say, like, if something, like, we will be watching the elections as well, like, on the visual investigations team, so, yeah.
How important was the body camera footage for you?
It wasn't the most important thing. Like, one thing I'll say is I think we could have produced this piece without some of those more, you know, behind-the-scenes things. Like, again, if you're in a case where, like, the military and police are going to be even more against you, like, getting that type of footage is probably going to be extremely hard. We could have produced Day of Rage without it. But I think actually the power of the body cam in this case was less evidentiary. By the time we got it, it took a while to get it. We had built up a strong case for what happened, but it was like emotionally very intense. And like for a viewer just watching from the police's perspective what happened, and in terms of raising questions about why they didn't have the support they needed, it was, I think, really valuable. It's also become super valuable, obviously, in court cases against specific rioters, because a body cam captures very clear imagery of people's faces and such. But just on a higher level, I want to emphasize that I don't think you need that type of information. Like, if it feels like it's going to be impossible to, you know, get the police to cooperate with you, or get, you know, a government official to cooperate with you to get that type of information, you don't need it. There's a lot of ways to report around that.
So we have just 2 minutes, unfortunately. But I'd like to ask you to say what's the most important thing in this kind of work. Is it the team effort? Is it to be prepared? Is it to do your own research? Just the most important thing, the last message that you want to say to us.
Oh my God, that's really hard. I am going to go with collaboration for a lot of reasons. I think, so I'm not a journalist by background or training. I did human rights work before coming to the Times, and I had a preconception of journalism as an incredibly competitive field where like people would fight you before they like shared their sources, and where it was going to be really hard to collaborate, and that's certainly true in some cases, but I am very lucky to be on a team where that's not the case, and to be on a team where we also want to do like collaboration externally. So like everyone, I would love to meet you. I think this type of work really benefits from having multiple people, just in terms of like pulling on all of your resources, pulling on people's expertise. But most importantly, like with this type of work, you have to be airtight. Like the moment Visual Investigations publishes a mistake, like we're done. Like I feel like we rely so much on transparency and credibility. Like I dread the day we have to publish a serious correction, because immediately, like I feel like with human sources, people give you more leeway if like there's a little bit of, but with this, like we're telling people this is for sure it. And when you rely that much on accuracy, like minute by minute accuracy, you want to make sure you get 10 pairs of eyeballs on it before you publish. So I'm very lucky to have the colleagues that I do, and like I'm the one here talking to you, but it should be like 30 of us.
So before I want to say thank you very much for being with us. I've learned a lot, and I hope everybody here did the same. So before that, I have two announcements in Portuguese, if I may. Então, antes de vocês darem uma salva de palmas muito grande para a Hayley, que ela não sabe o que eu estou falando, dois avisos.
Somebody translate for me later.
It's going to be a surprise. Haverá agora, às 4 horas, o lançamento dos livros do Guilherme Amado e da Magali Prado. Então, compareçam, por favor. Eu ganho 10% do que eles venderem. E está um pedido para a gente sair rapidamente da sala quando terminar, porque eles vão preparar o auditório para o encerramento, tá bom? É a hora da surpresa para a Hayley.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you all grabbed my contact info when it was up there, but if not, find me. Also, the emoji was a finger heart because I am Korean, so finger heart.